So, good morning. Hey, can someone shut the doors? Thanks. Thank you so much for coming this morning. Today is also a very text-heavy kind of denominations, kind of wrapping all the way up to kind of non-denominational churches. I made a strategic decision to not include the Mormon Church in our discussion of Christian denominations because I want to spend a whole session on Mormonism. Mormons, again, would say that they are a Christian denomination. I would maybe argue with that, but I'm not going to. We'll talk more about that when we talk about Mormonism. So again, this is part 2 of Christian denominations in the U.S. Part 1, like I said, at the end of worship, will be on our church website. You can find those PowerPoints by going on the resource tab, and then they start to list down there. And if you click on it, it will download a PDF of the PowerPoint. So it's not like you have to have PowerPoint to view them. They'll just open up as a document. So we're gonna continue, if Mike. So we're gonna talk about Baptists. The word Baptist comes from the Greek term baptizo, meaning to baptize. Baptizo, I thought, would always make a great name for a Marvel superhero, by the way. You skipped one history, I think. Oh, it disappeared. Go one more. There we go. They're not in the right order. Yep. So Baptists originally started in the early 1600s as a separatist movement from the Church of England, or the Anglican Church. Two streams of Baptists appeared early on in England. The General Baptist, who leaned more towards Arminian in their views of grace, sin, and salvation, and the Particular Baptists, who were more Calvinistic in their understanding of doctrines. So again, if you remember, Calvinists, kind of predestination, right? Arminian would be baptism as necessary for salvation. Okay? You want to click to the next slide. So that's where that... Due to increasing persecution by the Church of England, Baptists began to flee England for the American colonies, where they were also persecuted. Baptist churches continue to grow in the U.S. In the U.S., enshrined religious liberty into its newly formed constitution and has branched out into many American denominations. That brief essay I was going to include, but I did not. So keep going. All right? So you have Baptists moving essentially from England. What churches look like, Baptists can have a variety of worship practices, but most commonly Baptists will worship through singing, prayer, receiving tithes and offerings, listening to the word preached, and giving a time for response. That time for response is known as an altar call. Okay? So that's when in a church service, you've heard this beautiful sermon, very different than the one you heard today. Then you have a physical response to it where you go up to the altar and you invite Jesus to be a part of your life. Okay? While the Lord's Supper might be celebrated as well, Baptist churches differ on how frequently they should observe the Lord's Supper. Generally, Baptist communion does not offer wine either. It's only grape juice. Keep going. Baptist churches believe that Christ is the head of the church and that Christ guides every local church through the Spirit living within the members of each church. While Baptists may voluntarily join associations, each individual church is autonomous. Most Baptist churches are congregation ruled, but some are led by single pastors, while others are led by a plurality of elders selected by church members. Here's a distinctive between Baptists and like Catholics, Anglicans, Methodists, Lutherans, right? So in a Baptist congregation, you do not have a denominational head who assures that people have gone through a theological educational process before they serve in a congregation. There are some Baptist churches who look at their membership and say, oh, Dean is going to be the pastor of this church. There are other Baptist churches who, when they have a pastoral opening, will put that out, and they'll seek individuals to apply to lead their congregations, rather than having a denominational body saying, hey, these are qualified people to do this. Now, that's not saying that Baptist ministers don't go on to receive theological education or higher degrees in theology. They do. But it is my understanding that in most polity, those degrees are not required to serve as leaders of congregations. Does that make sense? Okay, keep going. Distinctives. Baptists in general teach the autonomy of the local church, that each local church should govern its own affairs. So that's what I was just saying about the calling of leadership, right? But that also is true with other aspects of church life as well. Baptists reject infant baptism and believe a person must make a profession of faith before being baptized, or a believer's baptism, all right? Relatedly, Baptists stress the importance of regenerating church membership, that someone must not be included in membership of a local church without professing to be a Christian. So here at People of Hope, we allow full participation of members who have a variety of theological viewpoints and distinctives, right? And they must not, they profess the Apostles' Creed as part of kind of formal membership into the church, but we do not limit participation in church if they have varying viewpoints. That is not generally true with the Baptist church. I say generally true with the Baptist church. There are many churches who will invite folks to come be a part of worship services, things like that. But then involvement after that can be somewhat limited. Does that make sense? Okay. And then you skipped too quick. Early American Baptists emphasized the importance of religious liberty for all faith based on their belief that genuine decisions to follow Christ cannot be coerced. This is separation of church and state. Okay, that's what's in our Constitution. If you read about the separation of church and state, it is all about the state not establishing a national church. It's not necessarily about churches talking about state issues. That's where it gets confused. Okay? So congregations have every right, and can do so, to talk about political reality. Right? The government, however, can't say that all American citizens have to be Lutherans. Okay, going to keep going. Converge is a Baptist denomination once known as the Baptist General Conference until 2008, and then Converge Worldwide until 2015. Its heritage traces back to Swedish Baptists in the 19th century. The Southern Baptist Convention split from the Northern Baptists, now American Baptists, in 1845, and is one of the largest religious groups in America. When you hear about a Baptist church, it's usually a Southern Baptist church. It is conservative theologically and socially. The National Baptist Convention is an African American Baptist denomination that merged in 1895 from 3 separate conventions. Keep going. The American Baptist Convention is the new name, established in 1950, for the Northern Baptist Convention, formerly created in 1907, which traces its heritage most directly to the split between Northern and Southern Baptists in 1845. Cooperative Baptist Fellowship split from the more conservative Southern Baptist Convention in 1991. It tends to be more moderate to liberal theologically and socially than the Southern Baptist Convention. Free Will Baptists are a more Armenian strain of Baptists that trace their heritage back to the Baptist churches started in the colonies in New Durham, New Hampshire, and Chowan, North Carolina. What does that all mean? It means that there are a variety of Baptists who can't get along with each other. Just like there's a variety of Lutherans who can't get along with each other, and a variety of Methodists who can't get along with each other, right? So much like mainline Protestant denominations, Baptists have experienced lots of splits theologically, okay? Nothing new. So that's Baptists in a nutshell. Any questions? Yes. It's in the Bible. Yes. I know. Weird. Why don't Baptists drink? Yeah, Autumn Ridge is a non-denominational church with its ties to the Southern Baptist Convention. Okay, so and Autumn Ridge does some amazing things. We just disagree on some theological points, most notably about human sexuality. So while my experience, this is online, is that we would love to be in cooperation, but that's a hurdle sometimes for them to overcome. Okay, yeah. Do they have sex police? I don't know about the underground police movement of the Southern Baptist Convention. So contact your local church, Southern Baptist Church, and ask them if they have the sex police. Marilyn is volunteering to be the sex police. Yee. Okay. Marilyn just said that she's an expert to make sure that people are doing it right. Yeah. Yeah, mostly they're part of the Southern Baptist Convention. So mostly pretty conservative. Okay. Now, I do not know enough about the different conventions and the different splits. These were just major splits. There's tons of them. What all the theological distinctives are between each split. But more than likely, they're a Southern Baptist church. Okay, we're going to keep going. E-free churches or evangelical free churches. The term evangelical signifies associations of churches that trace their heritage to the birth of evangelicalism in the modern era, while free identifies it as part of the free church heritage that sought to separate church doctrine and practice from government control. Okay, keep going. In 1950, the Swedish Evangelical Free Church and the Norwegian Danish Evangelical Free Church Association merged to form the Evangelical Free Church of America. Both groups were started by immigrants in the 1880s. These are folks who left Sweden and Denmark and the Netherlands because those countries have state religions, right? So they immigrated to the United States not only for monetary reasons, but established these denominations with the idea of separation of government and church. Make sense? Okay, keep going. Worship services are much more in line like Baptist churches than high church liturgies like Roman Catholic and Anglican. So, I call Roman Catholic and Anglican worship services churches of the smells and bells, right? High church, which means a high importance is placed on standardized liturgy, formality. Most E-free churches are low church, which means that there is less emphasis placed on those things. In terms of ELCA congregations in Rochester, Bethel, Zumbro, High church, people of hope, low church. Okay? It's just a way that people choose to worship. Okay? We're going to keep going. Evangelical free churches follow a congregational model of church governance, just like the Baptists. Okay? Keep going. The Evangelical Free Church of America allows for some diversity of belief and doctrine with the confines of their statement of faith. For instance, they have pastors and congregations that lean more toward a Calvinist understanding of salvation, and others that lean more toward an Arminian understanding of salvation. Remember what we just said before, baptism, predestination, all that kind of stuff. Based in a 2018 doctrinal survey, a majority of churches associated with the Evangelical Free Church of America practice elder-led congregational rule. So not rules placed on them by a denomination, but rules based on them of elders of the church. So a more formalized church council that generally has more power in dictating the life and faith of the community than we do here at People of Hope. Okay? In 2019, the E-Free Church of America removed premillennial from its statement of faith on the end of times, confirming it was a non-essential belief in the denomination. That means that the end of times were coming before the millennium. That obviously didn't happen, so they figured, hey, it's probably not that important anymore. Okay? Keep going. The E-Free Church of America's headquarters is based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where all the Scandinavians showed up, and has 1,600 churches in association based upon the EFCA Statement of Faith. And the Evangelical Free Church of Canada, established in 1917, is based in British Columbia and has over 140 churches across Canada. So not a large denomination. E-Free churches tend to be more conservative theologically as well as socially. Okay? Any questions about E-Free congregations? Awesome. We're going to keep going. Yes, keep going. Click the next slide. The name Restorationist, whatever, I mispronounce that all the time, refers to the focus on recovering the pew faith of the early church as described in the New Testament. Keep going. Sometimes referred to the Stone Campbell movement, that movement started in the Second Great Awakening and focuses on restoring the local churches in their faith and practices to what the Bible teaches in the New Testament. Keep going. Many churches of Christ do not, that's what they're known as mostly, do not use musical instruments since these aren't mentioned in the New Testament, singing unaccompanied by music, a cappella. Some, however, do include musical instruments in worship. The Lord's Supper is observed every Sunday because that is mandated or that is celebrated in the New Testament. Not mandated, but celebrated in the New Testament. Keep going. Polity churches of Christ are independent congregations with elders, deacons, and ministers leading the congregation. Again, not strong denominational ties. Keep going. Baptism by immersion is essential to salvation because of what was described as baptism in the Gospels, baptism in the Jordan River. The New Testament alone is the guide for worship. Many within the tradition are against formalizing beliefs in creeds and confessions, even if they agree with many key teachings of the Christian faith. Keep going. The Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, is the mainline denomination within the movement. Southern congregations, called Churches of Christ, split from the Disciples of Christ after the Civil War, all over using instruments in worship. That's the main point, but there were other reasons too. Some of them had to do with slavery. Another group called Christian Churches, Churches of Christ, began to separate in 1926 from the Disciples of Christ for several reasons, including their concern over theological liberalism in the Disciples of Christ denomination. This strand is more broadly evangelical than the other two strands. For example, Southeast Christian Church in Louisville, Kentucky. Okay? So just like in Lutheranism, there is a spectrum of liberal conservative in this particular denomination. That being said, the most liberal would be kind of equated to the Missouri Synod in Lutheranism. Yes. Tend to be rather conservative. Okay? My brother's congregation, he is a Nazarene pastor, walks in the way of the Nazarene, walks in the way of Jesus, would fall into this category of denominations. He does not eat locusts and honey, Marilyn, but he doesn't drink. He abstains from going to movies. His children don't dance or didn't dance before going to college. I mean, there's precepts or rules that govern living in the right way. So walking a way of righteousness to make oneself right before God. Okay? It's interesting. We have lots of dialogues about that. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. So Anita was sharing that her husband is from Indiana. Lots of Disciples of Christ churches there, and that when they started dating, David's parents were worried because Anita was a Lutheran, and that meant David would probably start drinking. And did it come to fruition? Yep. Yeah, you did. It's okay. It's okay. Yep. Right. Right. You don't engage in some of the things that we would view pretty timid, because that can lead to a slippery slope of damnation. The pastor in Footloose was a Disciples of Christ pastor. Footloose, the movie Footloose. John Lithgow. Yep. Okay. Should we keep going? Pentecostal and charismatic traditions. I had to get excited because they tend to be excitable people. The term Pentecostal highlights the focus on the coming of the Spirit in Acts 2 at Pentecost. Charismatic derives from the Greek word charisma, which means gift, and most relevantly refers to the gifts given by the Spirit. See Romans chapter 12 or 1 Corinthians chapter 12. Cooper, for you, these would be the Pentecostal Riz congregations. Okay? Now he's embarrassed that I said Riz. I know. I just wanted to throw in some millennial slang. Made me feel not so old. Okay, keep going. Pentecostal themes can be traced back to early 19th century movements like the Wesleyan holiness tradition and the higher life movements. However, the most prominent events identified as the beginning of modern Pentecostalism are revivals in the early 1900s, one at Bethel Bible College in Topeka, Kansas, and the other at the Azusa Street Mission in Los Angeles. We talked about the Azusa Street Mission when we talked about Christianity in the United States a long time ago. So a differential from the Disciples of Christ to Pentecostal, right? So most of the Disciples of Christ congregations that I have not been present for worship services for don't take, trying to figure out the best way to say this, don't engage in practices of like speaking in tongues and things like that. That's this denomination that we're talking about now, the Pentecostal movement. Okay, people generally aren't slain by the Spirit in Disciples of Christ congregations, they are in Pentecostal traditions. Okay? Keep going. So while Pentecostal churches will share some common church practices like singing, preaching, baptism, the Lord's Supper, and receiving offerings, these churches may also include times for giving prophecies, along with those who speak in tongues and interpret them. Okay? Big difference. Okay, keep going. Pentecostal churches are congregationalists. They may be independent congregations or local congregations that associate with other like-minded churches, cooperative fellowships. However, the charismatic movement will adapt to the specific church polity of its denomination. Do not understand why that last sentence. I picked that up from a book. I do not understand that. But Pentecostal churches, much like earlier denominations that we've talked to about this morning, also have a practice of picking their preachers or leaders from within the congregation. That's that congregationalist aspect of it. Doesn't always happen that way, but that's part of their religious heritage. Okay? Again, not formal instruction as necessarily a necessity for these congregations, although that does happen. Keep going. Pentecostalists tend to follow the Wesleyan tradition. I don't know why I make these slides so small. Those same versions may hold to a more Calvinistic view of salvation. Okay? Due to its rapid growth in the global South, South America, Africa, and Asia, Pentecostalism is one of the most ethnically diverse Christian traditions in the modern era. One of the distinctive of Pentecostalism is the doctrine of baptism in the Holy Spirit that occurs after conversion. A person who has already been born again should seek to receive empowerment for the spirit of ministry. This is what I refer to as being slain by the Spirit. Okay? Pentecostals believe all the gifts of the Spirit mentioned in Paul's letters continue, including the miraculous gifts like healings and speaking in tongues. Pentecostals can tend to downplay reason and tradition while focusing on scripture and experience when doing theology. Okay? Much more important about what we experience as a group than maybe what tradition says we should be focusing on as a group. If you want a popular pop culture kind of expression that's actually really good, even though it kind of makes fun of the idea of charismatic healings, is the movie Leap of Faith with Steve Martin. Okay? So in that movie, Steve Martin plays kind of an itinerant preacher who figures out a way to scam people out of their money by claiming he is a Pentecostal preacher healer. So he sets up these tents in these towns and he gives people earpieces and tells them what to say and figures all out this stuff and then performs these fake healings, which then causes people to give him money to support his ministry. This all happens until one day a person is miraculously healed and he doesn't know what to do with himself. Okay? But I only lift that movie up, even though it is portrayed as being fake. The one Pentecostal worship service that I've been a part of was very similar to the worship service that is portrayed in that movie. Okay? You can look at other like YouTube videos where and I would not do this, where more conservative or mainline theologians will mock worship services of people dancing around and speaking in tongues. I just don't understand it and haven't experienced it. It's not a part of my expression of faith, but I don't want to discount it. But if you're curious on what that might look like, just YouTube Pentecostal worship service. Okay? We're going to keep going. Yep. Next slide. No, that's the same slide. There we go. Assemblies of God is the largest Pentecostal denomination globally. Church of God in Christ is a historically black denomination within Pentecostalism. United Pentecostal Church is international, is one of the several open oneness Pentecostal denominations that reject the Trinity as traditionally defined. little break from traditional Christianity. The charismatic movement seeks to bring renewal with Pentecostal distinctives to various denominations and churches mentioned above. The Calvary Chapel movement was started by Chuck Smith and is evangelical and moderately Pentecostal. Chuck Smith is one of several leaders associated with the rise of the Jesus movement. That is a fascinating movement. We're not going to talk about it today, but I would recommend that if you're curious, type in Jesus movement into your Google search bar and see what pops up. Okay? There is a small charismatic movement in the ELCA that talks about speaking in tongues and these healings. It's very, very small. I don't think there's any congregations that practice in that movement in the state of Minnesota. There you go. Any questions about Pentecostals or... Awesome. Okay, we're going to keep going. Non-denominational churches. The name identifies that the church has no affiliation with any specific Christian denomination. Surprise, surprise, that's why we call them non-denominational churches. Okay, in the 20th century, more and more churches began to identify as independent or non-denominational with no historic ties to other denominations. Keep going. Non-denominational churches tend to be more low church in their worship, like Baptist and E-free churches, though a non-denominational church can have as much or as little liturgy as the individual church decides. Most non-denominational churches are more like Baptists than any other denominations. There you go. That's Autumn Ridge. Okay? Non-denominational churches will be congregational since they have no commitment to any specific denomination. Keep going. Non-denominational churches have no connection to any denomination, although they may partner with like-minded churches on various mission projects. Like-minded is important to lift up there. Based on the first distinctive, non-denominational churches will be congregational in their form of government. Since they are truly independent, non-denominational churches can freely write their doctrinal statements and church practices, though they tend to be broadly evangelical and Baptistic in their main beliefs. What that is trying to say is more conservative in their beliefs. Okay? Fellowship Bible churches, founded by Gene Getz, started as a movement of churches that emphasized Bible teaching, fellowship, and outreach as key components of the church. Not all churches with this name are associated with the movement. This is the largest kind of collective of non-denominational churches, or these Fellowship Bible churches. Okay? There's many non-denominational churches that exist, and they tend to be large. So in town is Autumn Ridge. Eagle Brook would also, I would put Eagle Brook into this category, although they also have some denominational heritage. Can't remember what it is. But generally very open, very friendly. I'm trying to hold my tongue. They'll invite you in. I'm going to talk purpose-driven church language. Rick Warren, that was popular before I came to People of Hope, right? So in purpose-driven church, Rick Warren talks about how worship services are the entry for involvement in a congregation. So you want to put on high-quality worship that is not too offensive. That means not calling people out on the bad things that they do. That's very user-friendly and would have a high production value. Members of the church, they express their membership more fully through small group ministries. Rick Warren uses this baseball diamond analogy that worship is first base and you're trying to get people to home base, and where real transformation and membership in congregations happen is third base, but between third base and home. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, Anita. Yeah, although he has strong Baptist roots. So Anita asked about Joel Osteen and the big old church in Texas, right? Yeah. That's when you come to the Lutheran church where we remind you you were saved by grace, right? That we're just trying to make sense of this thing that is fully mysterious and we can't ever have full knowledge of, but we're doing our best. And God loves us when we do our best. And even when we don't do our best. Okay? Is that the last slide? Yeah. All right, so we have about 7 minutes. Is there anything that you want to talk about? Again, there are many other smaller denominations in the U.S. There's a joke. I was watching a show yesterday about this woman who was living in Los Angeles. Something bad happened. She moved back to her home in Arkansas. The town had about 2,500 people in it, and she said there was something like 32 congregations, right? So it's really hard to cover all Christian denominations or types of churches in the U.S. There is a plethora. Yeah. The question was, how do you get kicked out of church? It all depends on the denomination. All denominations have operating rules and procedures, or congregations do, right? And if you break those rules, procedures, one thing other than corrective action would be to boot someone out. I had to ask to be excommunicated from the Catholic Church when I became Lutheran. They were very hesitant to remove me off their rules. Yeah, anyway, Larry.
I grew up in Missouri Synod, and I was just about excommunicated in the late 60s because I wanted to bring my guitar into church. It's just unheard of. And I was quoting Psalms, and everything to justify it. My dad was a pastor.
Your dad was going to excommunicate you from the church? No. Okay, I was going to say, let's talk about that family system. I'm joking. Yeah.
And when I got married, I wanted to transfer my Lutheran membership to another congregation. I got this nice form letter saying I'd been dropped from the rolls.
Yeah, dropped from the rolls, yeah.
They could not transfer me because it wasn't another
Missouri Synod Church, yeah. So, Larry, Dave asked what it takes to be excommunicated. Larry Stacy shared that he was almost excommunicated. I'm saying this for people who might be watching at home. Excommunicated from the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church because he wanted to bring his guitar and worship. His dad was even the pastor. Then I asked about his dad wanting to excommunicate him from the church. He said, no, as the congregation. I felt a lot better about that. Then Marilyn Gansman said that she wanted to transfer her Lutheran membership to another Lutheran congregation, but instead she was dropped, essentially excommunicated from the rolls of that Missouri Synod Lutheran Church because she wasn't transferring her membership to another Missouri Synod Lutheran Church. Yes. Southern Baptist. All right.
You were not allowed to work in the nursery area.
Okay.
Children.
Wow.
Also, when I was younger, the minister got up in front of congregation and told the whole church that my family was getting divorced and shared a bunch of stuff in front of the congregation, and the minister ended up getting excommunicated out of it because the leaders that was beyond.
Yep. I'm grateful that they did. So Teresa was sharing that she grew up Southern Baptist, and the way that you could get excommunicated from the Southern Baptist Church, or not necessarily excommunicated, but she was sharing that if you were someone who went out drinking or dancing, you were no longer allowed to work with the kiddos because you could corrupt the kiddos with that sinful behavior. And then she shared a story about a pastor who shared some intimate details about a family situation and that went beyond the scope of pastoral care or just common sense. So the church elders brought that pastor and excused the pastor from the fellowship of that congregation, so excommunicated the pastor. So we have 1 minute left. Next week, we are going to talk about Judaism, I think is what's on the docket. So thank you so much. We will see you next time. I've not seen it.
Well, it's chosen.
Oh, I saw a preview.
It's a little bit over dramatic.
Yeah.
My gosh.
One of the guys from Prison Break is on there, playing Judas. Anyway, sorry. Another TV show.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting, but it's kind of
Yeah. Thank you all.
The show you were talking about, it's not the new Laverne Cox show?
The what?
The new Laverne Cox show?